son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're here, and we're joined today by good Texan friend, Paul Estrada.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
There we go.
There we are.
There we go.
Thank you.
Dude, how you doing, man? How's life? Is everything bigger down there?
Just a little bit, I would say, we're marginally scaled, a little bit larger than most things, mostly in food. Charles Barkley always says it best. So
he's a big boy.
Yeah, he is a big boy. And that's Texas for you.
Fucking yeehaw, dude.
Yeehaw.
Well, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this because this is dense, and I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts. We're going to talk about Noah's Ark. There's a great big controversy. Everyone likes to fight over the specifics of what's written down, and there's so many different things written down. But what interests me the most about this thing is that there's tangible things that cannot be ignored that are actually, you can go there and view them and see them, and they kind of line up with the story. So for those of you that don't know the story of Noah's Ark, it's the biblical story of Noah building a boat, 2 of every animal to survive the cataclysmic flood and rebuild society. Okay? And there's many versions of that. And what people are finding now is that the overlapping stories from the cultures of that region, maybe there's more truth to that story than is allegory or supposed to be it's just supposed to be a fable. And there's a fair amount of people who have found some pretty tangible evidence all over Turkey to kind of suggest that maybe his name wasn't Noah, maybe it wasn't 2 of every animal, but there was a massive boat that survived a cataclysm and had its part in rebuilding society after the cataclysm. So I was down in Texas, Preston and I were down there fucking shredding with you guys in Texas, and we were talking about this. What had you known about this beyond just like the Bible story of Noah's Ark? What were you aware of about any of this?
Yeah, I mean, you heard this has been news for years that they had possibly found Noah's Ark in, an area in Turkey. So, that's mostly what I knew about, this whole, it possibly being truthful is, that there was evidence to suggest that a large vessel was found in a mountainous region, which, suggests that, possibly how would a vessel be able to make it up on top of a mountain without, the help of very high water levels?
Yeah, water levels.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So to me, I always, that's mostly what I knew about it, besides, all the religious stories that I grew up with growing up in a Catholic school and everything, growing up Catholic. So, I knew all the stories, but once you start to learn that it might actually be true, that's where you start seeing that, there could be something more to just, like you said, the allegorical aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that I've always felt this way. I think that people are too married to the specific words without taking a second to realize that even like the King James version of the Bible, that's heavily edited. That's been heavily edited and translated many fucking times for us, Americans, English Americans, to be able to read and interpret. So I personally have never been caught up on the specific words of any religion, because I understand that they've been translated who knows how correctly over thousands of years before it got to me. So what I've always looked to, and this is something that I wasn't necessarily into this. I was more into like the known history or esoteric history of Egypt and Samaria and aware of the idea that, there's people that think that those civilizations are more connected than they are different, and that, Egypt kind of inherits a lot of its stories, maybe some of its buildings, definitely a lot of its tools and techniques from Samaria. Maybe Samaria inherited that from somebody else, another, proto-civilization. And I'd never gone down the Noah's Ark thing, but what I was most interested in is like the extreme overlap. So, like I was telling you, this is like a thing that in the past, maybe like a year or two, I've become aware of and have gone down the rabbit hole of to just become conversational about. What video did you start with? Or like, what was the video where you're like, oh shit?
I would probably have to say it was the videos about Ron Wyatt and, his little expeditions, everything like that. It's a little off the storyline of Noah, but, it's still in the biblical stories of, tracking down Moses, his path and everything like that. And actually the scientific evidence that they found in the Red Sea.
Yeah, I think this video is okay. Let me also just say this really quickly. I don't necessarily agree with the more Christian elements of these videos, but I find it's a little preachy. Okay.
Yes.
And again, I'll go back to what I said, and it's that most people today, in my opinion, who are practicing a religion are a little more too concerned about the specifics of the words and less
it's like playing the game telephone,
over thousands of years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Things are going to get changed.
And for me, the stuff that sticks out is like the tangible shit. So good point. Yes. This video, which is a combination of a number of videos on the Truth is Christ channel. But it consists of a number of different videos of Ron Wyatt, some of his discoveries, and then people going to confirm that independently. Now, Ron Wyatt has been on this tip since like the 70s. He is a Seventh-day Adventist, and it is for that reason that a lot of traditional Christians outright, ignore what he says as anything worth entertaining. But to be fair, this guy really has discovered some interesting shit. So the first thing they talk about in this video that is of relevance is him finding the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and finding like this ashen dust that was, this could just as easily be pareidolia, but there's like the idea of a burnt building. Some people see this as a completely decimated city skyline. And there's some more of like the pyramidal structures that are a little more like step pyramids or ziggurats, which were the pyramids of that area at the time. And I'm trying to see if I can there's like the one where they like just go into the area and they see this huge pyramidal type structure. Oh, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at remains of other ziggurats in that area of the globe, the ziggurat at Ur, it's got kind of similar degradation, and it would be similarly old, but this, according to the timeline, I'm guessing would be even older.
Yeah, so really interesting stuff, because a lot of the things that they found out there that a lot of locals believe to be, just rock formations or, erosion over time. When people actually look at it, they were saying, well, a lot of these don't look made by nature. They don't look made by erosion.
Obscure shapes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They look too man-made. They look too symmetrical
yeah.
to possibly be something that was just from time and erosion, wearing away rock.
purely random. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then of course the balls of sulfur.
Yes, yeah, that was really interesting.
This again, like this, whether they're, what if the guy's name wasn't even Noah, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if Moses' name wasn't Moses?
Yeah.
Right. So like that is up for debate. Balls of sulfur that are being found embedded in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
Roughly near the area that would have been, and again, that will become more relevant when we start talking about some of these other sites and their proximity to this. But these balls of sulfur are interesting. So you can find them from the size of a pea to the size of like a tennis ball, and they're pure, almost completely pure sulfur. And there's no other sulfur like it in the world. Volcanic sulfur has like a yellowish color, and is only
exactly.
It's only 40% sulfur, and these are like 90.
Yeah, I think they said 90 something percent.
One of
sulfur.
One of the tests said like 98 something. They're close, and it's white. There's no sulfur like this
Exactly.
elsewhere in the world. This again, that's like tangible shit. And
which,
they do. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. In the story, of Sodom and Gomorrah, the whole idea was that they were sinful cities and needed to be smited. So God sent fire and brimstone, which is the biblical name for sulfur, to rain down upon those cities to destroy them. And so, again, brimstone being found in the site that they believe to be Gomorrah, sulfur, and then not having the chemical makeup of sulfur
Typical
that is normally
sulfur.
seen from volcanic eruption, or sulfur that has just been buried in the earth and deposits, is it's pretty interesting stuff.
It is, and I really don't want to understate like the surrounding this stuff. So they find these balls of sulfur embedded in what's like, it looks like rock, but it's dust. Like if you touch it, it just crumbles to dust.
Crumbled away.
It's like compacted ash. And these balls of sulfur, they do multiple demonstrations where they just light it on fire. And it's so pure, it just stays on fire and melts. And smells like fucking sulfur. I don't know, dude. It's crazy. But, and this, one of the things they go into like great detail is that this area is not like a protected park. There was, before Ron Wyatt and his people started going there frequently, there was barely a road that came out here. It's just, there's no stone, no marker, nothing. And, all these unique scenarios. Here's another example of like, either pareidolia or the remnants of some kind of man-made structure.
One thing that was a little interesting to me about that, though, is no one really seemed to float the idea that, what if it was something from space that happened to just fall down in a very not great spot, erasing a civilization. There's no evidence of craters or anything like that, except for the sulfur being buried in what seems like ash.
Right.
But it also seems that could be something that's very plausible. Of an asteroid enters the atmosphere and breaks up before it can hit the Earth, and then it's just raining fire rather than something cataclysmic that would just take out the whole area.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, like when you stop looking at the words in any religious text literally, and you look at them more abstractly, a comet or asteroid breaking apart and destroying a city at that time would have been put down as God destroyed these cities for some reason. The hand of
God. Yep.
That's what that equates to, and that's again why you shouldn't always interpret everything literally all the time. This is going to be counterintuitive because we're going to talk about Noah's Ark literally existing. But I don't necessarily think the name Noah is what that individual's name is. And abstractly, there's always a lesson to be learned from any story. So I don't know. Without getting too heady, we'll just continue on here. Here's where they're doing the testing. This is 98.4% sulfur, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what like the typical makeup of asteroids or space rocks is, but you know, the fact that it's not found anywhere on Earth, it's like, where the fuck did it come from? There's no like volcanic activity. Then there's these. I mean, these are definitely looking more like man-made structures.
Yeah,
like
I couldn't see erosion cutting out a square.
Yeah,
square hole, you know.
Well, they have like there's somewhere over here too, like caves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go.
Basically, little entrances.
Those look more natural, but you know, this. I just want to have this off. It's just a lot of symmetrical lines, and yes, rocks fracture symmetrically along straight lines. That does happen, but that combined with the sulfur, combined with the just general location and its proximity to other things that we'll be talking about here in a second, it's just interesting.
It's very interesting.
And that's Ron Wyatt, and he was doing that shit in fucking the 80s,
70s, 80s, early 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I mean, and then I was doing a little bit of reading up on him, and he was just a anesthesiologist. He was funding his whole archaeological
passion.
Finds by passion by just he was fronting the bill himself, so it's pretty cool.
Well, hey man, he had faith. He had faith. Okay, so this is we are getting to Noah's Ark, I promise. And maybe actually here's where we break away for a second, because I've got a whole string of, let's try and do this in chronological order here.
There's a lot to build up to.
So I shared a video with you, which was, I don't know if it was this one, but it was of Matt LaCroix. And for anybody listening or watching, this is a great episode. Matt LaCroix has 2 appearances on Julian Dory's podcast. Both are awesome. But Matt LaCroix has some interesting theories about Moses, and the fact that Moses was... that story of Moses was actually modeled after a story from Samaria. Moses' name was different because he was a different person, but that culture passed that story up. It's not something that happened in the Christian chronology, but the Christian chronology and a lot of the Christian stories, they inherited them from other cultures. They weren't necessarily Christian. They weren't Christianity stories. Anyway, so Matt LaCroix has some very interesting things to say about Atlantis, the proto-civilization, then Samaria, then the cataclysmic event, and the rebuilding of humanity. And he is kind of important, I guess, in a little bit later when we start talking about Noah's Ark, because he tries to draw a lot of the connection to Göbekli Tepe, which is an ancient site located near the supposed location of Noah's Ark, and is thought to have been like maybe the first city rebuilt, or one of the first cities rebuilt after the cataclysm, and that the timeline is just way off. That didn't occur, like the Bible would say, a couple thousand years ago. It occurs, 20,000 years ago.
Yeah.
A much different number. And again, it states that a cataclysmic event did occur. It just didn't occur in the Christian chronology, and the Christian retelling of it isn't actually what happened. It's their interpretation to make it fit to Christianity. They inherited those stories from Egypt. Egypt inherited those stories from Samaria. Samaria inherited those stories from possibly a proto-civilization. But that podcast is great. Did you watch any of the Matt LaCroix links?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
What did you think about those?
I mean, it was pretty mind blowing, some of the stuff that he was bringing out there. You know, not even yeah, because I think the main purpose of that little 2-episode podcast was about Atlantis, but I think what struck me the most was where he started getting into ancient Samaria and talking about the underground cities that they had built because they had some kind of knowledge that there was going to be some great disaster that was going to befall upon them. And so they started building underground civilizations to be able to escape whatever was coming to them. And I think they were saying somewhere it spanned from Turkey to Iran or somewhere around there is where they had all these ancient underground bunkers.
This is one of them. This is called Darren Kuyu.
Yes.
And it's in Turkey. But yeah, you're right. Right in that area, there are a ton of these sites. And it said it could accommodate up to 20,000 people, had plumbing, had livestock, ventilation.
It was essentially the ancient version of the Fallout Vault.
Yeah, no, 100%. This was a bunker. This is an ancient bunker. But yeah, at the bottom, Göbekli Tepe's. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting shit about Turkey. Like, a lot of people want to shift all of these events happening to Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan. I just remember when I was a kid and they were telling me about the supposed locations of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a little further west. It was closer toward Egypt. But there's just too much shit in Turkey to ignore. There's like way too much shit in Turkey. You know, maybe Turkey is actually the location of all this shit. And it really, like, the evidence stacks up. Not to say that there isn't shit in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's tons of like legitimate, known, like verified ancient sites in all of those countries. But Turkey shit is just older. That's the crazy thing. It's like the dates of a lot of these sites really disrupt the modern, whatever we thought about how old the world was by analyzing Egypt and Samaria.
Facing the fact that, all civilizations stem from that area, where there's now more evidence showing that, it possibly wasn't, and it went back way further than what we thought.
Like maybe multiple iterations of humanity.
Exactly.
Well more than whatever we're thinking.
Exactly.
So yes, that's a great point. That's a whole different rabbit hole too, and
it's a big rabbit hole to fall down.
It's there. There's a lot there. There's a lot of legitimate shit. But anyways, back to Matt LaCroix. What else did you find interesting about what he had to say?
Well, I mean, he did mention this. He had a little bit towards the end there about Eridu. I don't know if you heard about that one at all.
Let me pull that up.
And that was that one was particularly interesting.
Eridu, right?
Yes. As an ancient library, but it wasn't written. What they took down wasn't written on paper. Because paper only lasts so long. A lot of it was written on granite tablets, which would be able to withstand the test of time. But a lot of it also had to do with Eridu. They had an archaeological build there, or they had an archaeological dig there. And for some reason, they just up and said, abandon the site. And then no one ever returned to it to continue the dig or study it more. And they just basically left it unguarded to where people were able to come in and just pilfer. Yeah, just take whatever they wanted, basically erasing the history of it. And so, a little bit of it sounded kind of a little too far-fetched conspiracy for me, but he did have a point of what's the best way to erase something is you just forget about it and let people destroy it.
Well, yeah, and it's also like one of those things where it doesn't necessarily have to be a conspiracy. Like, whatever. They got conquered. They lost control of that building. It fell into ruins, and people destroyed it. That there doesn't have to be a conspiracy for that. The sands of time will fuck everything up. So, it's at one point it was a coveted place with coveted knowledge, and at some point it fell out of that position, and over the sands of time, shit is just lost.
Just lost to time.
But that's not super crazy. There's also a bunch of stories about the first Middle East war and the second Middle East war, Desert Storm, and then Iraq and Afghanistan. There's many stories about our military going in and taking control of ancient sites and pillaging them. Museums, all sorts of, again, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sumerian ancient history, important pieces to the fucking puzzle, just taking it. In fact, there was a ring of people within the military who were stealing shit, and they had to create a task force to track them down and track down the pieces that they stole and repatriate them. But most notably, there was, let me find this. The ziggurat at this place, and this is the biblical, at the base of this ziggurat is supposedly the biblical birthplace of Abraham. There's also a number of different step pyramids. This one's surprisingly in great shape. Mm-hmm. But this is a serious ancient important site, and our military took control of this place. And looted it and built a huge fucking military base right next to it that is still there. And it's probably this. Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. It's just, why of all places would they decide to make a base there?
And loot it. Why was that a priority?
Exactly.
Why was that a priority in the war if it was making fucking Afghanistan free?
Mm-hmm.
Or freeing the people of Iraq? It was really suspect, and they did it in both Desert Storm and Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, this is controlling the story of this history. A lot of people have wanted to do it because this is this might give us a truer idea than the Bible of how old humanity is, and
it would shake the whole foundation of our world, because most of our world is based off the religious history. So if you start disproving religion, then you're going to have all kinds of chaos from that.
And it's always been funny to me too, because the first book of the Bible is the Torah, and the Quran and Islam as a whole recognizes a lot of the figures from Christianity and Judaism. They're the same people.
Mm-hmm.
They just have differing views on the prophet element of it. Who was right? Who is the true conduit to God? So this is, again, why I've never gotten too caught up on the words. When there's that much overlap, of course shit is going to be if I give one book to three people, three of them are going to get completely different meanings out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Much less, thousands of people when in the Stone Age, essentially,
over
in comparison
thousands
to
of years.
It's just, I've never getting caught up on the words, and when there's that much overlap in the story, I'm more interested in the overlap than I am in the fucking differences. In fact, I don't even care about the differences because I understand that.
Mm-hmm. All it takes is just one person to say, "Hey, I don't really like this part of the story." So as I'm copying it down. I'm just going to go ahead and change that little part right there.
Well, and that's what I made the point about the King James Bible. It's like a lot of people don't even realize there's multiple versions of the Bible that are more accurate than the King James Bible. There's books that have been intentionally omitted. Language has changed and evolved. You couldn't understand it if you were to read this in the Renaissance. You know, if you're going to go back to the foundation of fucking Christianity, you wouldn't be able to read it in Latin, you know. So it's not so abstract for me to think that, you know, maybe there is some truth to these stories, but we don't understand the context. And we definitely don't understand the context well enough to be like, well, this is for sure how it happened. This is for sure the right explanation.
This is 100% fact.
There's no way this can change or evolve.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so anyways, Matt LaCroix, let's get back on this train here. Matt LaCroix, he's got some very interesting stuff that he thinks about the connection between Samaria and the tales of the beginning of Christianity. He thinks they're one and the same. He has evidence to suggest that based off of interpretations of Sumerian tablets and Sumerian history, and then the new and evolving information that we're getting about sites like Göbekli Tepe and all these other ancient sites that we're uncovering and are verifying that the timeline might be different than we thought, which is fine, but everyone's going to get disrupted if it changes. So the next, I can't remember if I sent you this video, but this is the video of the pastor in Florida who says he thinks that the garden. Okay, so what did you think about this video?
You know, I mean, again, you know, we're going into the whole discussion of, you know, religious people making a lot of the narrative. And so, you know, this is a heavily religious man. So, you know, of course, he's going to be able to find what he's looking for if he, you know, he believes it enough. But at the same time, you know, I do think that it did have a lot of interesting facts to it. Just a lot of talks about, you know, the type of vegetation that grew in the area of the Garden of Eden, which he was able to say, like, hey, look, you know, we have those type of trees growing here. I can't remember exactly what trees he was saying. I mean,
Gopher wood.
Gopher wood being one, but I know there was others. And you know, he was able there. One of the largest, I think, marble deposits is in that area as well.
Florida's like one of the richest places in natural resources.
I mean, it could very well be, you know, a fertile crescent, if you wanted to call it that way.
Yeah, well, I don't think he goes into this, but there's this channel called Old World Florida, and his whole thesis is, yes, this place was the real Fertile Crescent. The actual Fertile Crescent is the Gulf of Mexico. And there's all these like land masses that would suggest if water were a little bit different, it would have just been a much larger and thriving ecosystem that would have been, you know, comparable to the Garden of Eden. Yeah,
exactly. And so, yeah, that I mean, it was very interesting to hear his take on it. Because I think they said, you know, the Garden of Eden is where one river becomes four heads. And there is a body of water like that in that area, which also helped cement the belief in him. And of course, you know, Gopher wood being another big one. But you know, yeah, it's very interesting.
If I could find the map, but
find that
they're talking about it right here, but I don't want to play this because they'll tell me to mute it. But yeah, it's this definitely from Child of God. But you can find this video. There's a bunch of people who have reposted it. Again, Old World Florida has a bunch of more detailed videos breaking this out. The guy's name is E.E. Calloway. He's a pastor in Florida, and he thought that Florida was the biblical location of the Garden of Eden. So the whole reason I'm saying that is because chronologically, that's the beginning, right? So there's the Garden of Eden, then a bunch of other shit, and then Noah's Ark. But it's important to say that because Noah's Ark was built with wood from the Garden of Eden, including gopher wood. And gopher wood only grows in one area in the world, and it's like southeast Arkansas, Florida, and fucking Georgia or something like. It's like the three states right there as they converge. The only places you can get it. And there's a bunch of other specifics that are mentioned specifically in the Bible that are unique to all of them being in one place, and that one place is right here. The guy in Old World, Florida, goes into way deeper lore, including the native people of this area. And there's a lot of strange correlations between Greek, ancient Hebrew, and the languages of the natives of this area. There was also, I used to live in Nashville, and I always thought this was weird. All over Nashville and all over the Southeast, really, there's references to ancient world shit. And this is like a very, it's a very Christian, conservative Christian place. And I never understood why there were so many places that were named after Egyptian cities or Greek or Roman, gods. And I never understood that. And I always thought it was something that the Christians did, but apparently a lot of those names were inherited from the native folks that were there. And, the English folks came and just kept calling it that area because that's what the natives called it. Meaning the natives on North America had named a bunch of cities and locations after ancient old world sites, meaning that they would be the original, and whatever is in Egypt and the Middle East would be like our
version of New York.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
New York and New Jersey, right?
Exactly.
Instead of York and Jersey, it's New York and New Jersey, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Or that there was some very enlightened group of individuals who just knew that history, and in homage to the true ancient. I don't know what's true, but it's just interesting. The other big thing that is super fucked is there's a lot of overlap between Greek and ancient Hebrew, and supposedly the Creek Indians, which means let me think this right. Creek in Greek means, I don't know, I'd have to watch that video again, but there's strong overlap between the Creek Indians and Greek folks. In fact, their language was so similar that they could speak with natives in that area of the country in Greek. They could write and speak with them in Greek because their languages were that similar. The natives, the Creek Indians.
This is the Creek tribe of America able to basically speak ancient Greek.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, there's major overlap between ancient Greek and Hebrew. So how would that have been possible? But there is some tangential evidence of colonizers who were here, who were conversing with the Creek Indians in Greek.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Wow.
But anyway, if that sounds interesting, go watch Old World Florida on YouTube. He's got a bunch of videos about a bunch of shit. Really good Florida origin story. Okay, so anyways, Gopherwood, Noah builds the ark. There's a cataclysmic event X amount of years ago. That ark sails for 40 days and 40 nights, and that can be a metaphoric 40 days and 40 nights. That might mean years, it might mean months, I don't know. Anyways, he ends up far away from where he started, and the place where they think he ended up is in Turkey, at the base of Mount Ararat, which is a real place, and it's mentioned in the Bible as kind of near where he landed, at the bases of the mountains of Ararat.
The dove flew back with the olive branch, signifying that there was land One thing I did want to touch on real quick was, the 40 days and 40 nights. So in the Bible, you see that 40 number come up quite a bit. You had, Moses with Noah with his 40 days, 40 nights. You had Moses when he was leading the Israelites out of Egypt. They wandered the desert for 40 years. Moses was at the top of Mount Sinai for 40 days, speaking with God. So Jesus was in the desert for 40 days being tempted by the devil. So you see that number come up quite a bit. And what I think it really is 40 isn't actually the specific number. Again, playing telephone over millennia, but it's more of the translation from the Torah to signify it was a very long amount of time that they were, out there. So 40 isn't actually the right number. It's just more of, it's saying that it was a long time.
Well, and again, like I was saying before, like the allegory of the Bible is dense. Like there's actual numerology baked into the Bible. There's understanding of the movement of stars baked into the Bible if you're interpreting it a certain way. And I agree with you. The stacking of things around certain numbers, it might be a number that holds a conceptual significance, like an esoteric principle. And that number being presented at that moment in that person's path is emblematic of a symbolic meaning,
journey, or
it might not be literally 40 something. It's symbolic of something else that would be understood to somebody who understands how to interpret it correctly. Mm-hmm. So you're totally right, and it is completely worth mentioning because there's a lot of that. There's a ton of that in the Bible, especially like numbers. Mm-hmm. Strange enough, numbers. Have you ever seen the movie Pi?
No, I have never seen that movie. Dude, I do know what you were talking about.
Okay, so that's one of Darren Aronofsky's first movies. It might be his first. He also did Noah's Ark with Russell Crowe. Mm-hmm. That movie is actually fucking excellent too. If you haven't seen either of those, watch both.
Russell Crowe and Emma Watson one.
The opening sequence in Noah's Ark is one of the coolest fucking things I've ever seen in film. And Pi is just a good old fashioned psychological brain fuck. It's like Requiem for a Dream, but more upsetting. Oh boy, nice.
I'll definitely check that out.
But in that movie, you'll understand why I'm telling you this, because he gets accosted by this like sect of Hasidic Jews who want his brains to interpret encoded mathematics in the Torah. It's like dude, that movie's bad shit. But that is real. Like there are folks who interpret the Torah under a certain in a certain context to glean like numerical data from it, and those numbers are what they interpret as the esoteric teachings.
The whole numerology. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and it's like they have a whole science and practice about it. Mm-hmm. But that's just to say, the Bible is that way too. So is the Quran, and that's how cultures, the learned of every culture dating back to antiquity, baked in the important lessons so that they would make it. They would stand the test of time, but also wouldn't be corrupted by the profane plebs like us interpreting them incorrectly.
Exactly.
Or trying to use them for our own personal advantage.
Us heathens.
Anyways, all right, so we're back to Mount Ararat. So here's where it gets weird. All right, Mount Ararat is a place in Turkey. And there's two supposed sites where people think Noah's Ark is. Okay. The first one is Drunapar. Now, this is the Duru Pinar, the Duru Pinar site. This is where Ron Wyatt thinks it is. Here is a picture. This is supposedly the remains of Noah's Ark. It matches the dimensions. Supposedly, if you see right here, they say those are the remnants of what would be a boat frame. There's also some post markers. But
it's just a weird kind of formation in the ground that you normally wouldn't see in the wild.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ron Wyatt's theory is that It was covered with mud at one point and just disintegrated. But if they were to excavate this entire site, they would find possibly remnants of nails, maybe remnants of wood, or other shit to signify that this was just not a naturally forming thing. But this is the site, and it's been known about for a long time. In fact, in Turkey, they openly acknowledge that this is the landing site of Noah's Ark. And I have this pulled up somewhere. Yeah. They've designated it Noah's Ark National Park, and I want to say the name of the town in English is Noah's Boat, but like they fully acknowledge it. This is where Noah landed. His ark is here. Now,
They've 100% leaned into it.
Yeah, this is just accepted shit, and that's been a long time. Ron Wyatt was late to the party on that one. In Turkey, they were already like, "Yep, this is where it was. This is where that went down." So, also at this site, there are a bunch of what appear to be ancient stone anchors for massive ships. Now, on Old World Florida, that guy goes into a bunch of detail about similar rock, the stones that are found in and around Florida. This is how they used to anchor and direct large ships in ancient times. These are stone anchors. And engraved on them are fucking the symbols of antiquity, as groups have, like, I guess, made Mecca type journeys here to, pay homage to the true cradle of the rebirth of society. But there's like Knights Templar crosses, different iterations of Christian Crusader crosses and Christianity crosses, symbols from all cultures, all types of cultures, and they're all over this place. And there's also there's like this little formation of them kind of gridded out, and there's some people that believe that they are the headstones for the bodies of Noah and his family, who made their house there after they got off of the boat. Now, they have like taken samples of stuff here. I don't think anything's proven about this. It's just an interesting formation. It matches the loose descriptions and its proximity to Mount Ararat and this town called Noah's boat.
Noah's boat. Mm-hmm.
All these goddamn stones.
Which would make sense. I mean, you wouldn't move too far from where you landed if, you had fertile ground there. Especially not after being on that boat for so long. Exactly.
You take what you can get. Like, you're not going to risk it again. You just, get out of the boat and do the shit. But this isn't on Mount Ararat. This is at the base of Mount Ararat. There's another site. I guess let me start closing these tabs too. There's another site that's actually on the mountain, and this is from 2004. But what was interesting is that this got an update in 2020 during COVID. But anyways, in 2004, somebody was looking on Mount Ararat and found this peculiar structure under the ice. And it was so buried under the ice that no one could look at it in 2004. Well, thanks to global warming, the ice melted a little bit. Warming. Thank you, global warming. The ice melted a little bit and revealed an even more distinct profile of this thing. And enough was revealed that people could go into it. So this was 3 years ago. 2022, these guys go up here, and again, this is on Mount Ararat. This is like up the mountain, not easily accessible. They're climbing into a cave, and inside this cave, they find fucking absolutely man-made wooden structures. I'm trying to get... This isn't the good one. Hang on, let me get to the second one, I guess. Yeah. So it's on the mountain. They climb into this hole, and what they find is wooden. This is absolutely wooden structure. So either there was a building on this mountain a long time ago that collapsed and got covered and forgotten about, or this is actually Noah's Ark. And this is like the frame of a boat, a multi-deck structure. These are all planks. These are cross beams. This is the boat.
It was too similar to a boat to really look like a, dwelling or some type of building that people were living in on top of the mountain.
Yeah, and this is real. It's just so inaccessible that, but this is real.
It's frozen in time.
Yeah. So personally, I think that's probably the winner for the actual thing.
That was my belief on it too. The other one looked too much like sourdough bread.
Well, it's just we can't ever verify that. That can be verified. And here's a map of this. This is just to give you an idea of how close all this shit is in proximity. Remnants of a site. There's the Ararat anomaly, what we just looked at. All that structure underneath the ice on the mountain. And then here's the Durupinar site. And I've got pulled up here too. This is Mount Ararat's distance from Göbekli Tepe. And then just so everyone can be aware too, all of Moses and Egypt, it's absolutely in the area.
In the grand scheme, it's really not that far away.
Really not that far at all.
No.
This is super fucking plausible. This is mentioned in the Bible. Mount Ararat is where Noah's Ark lands. This is like canonically accurate. So we can close this one too. Yeah, we're done with this. So now we're going to skip forward a little bit, right? So Noah lands. They start all the strife of rebuilding society, right? Ultimately, we get up to the point of Moses. And this is where we'll go back to Ron Wyatt. And we'll talk about all the Red Sea crossing stuff. And this will be great too. Are you cool to go like another half hour, 45 minutes? Like,
yeah, of course.
I figure we get to at least Mount Sinai and Moses, like that whole portion of it. Okay, cool. So
that works for me.
This portion of it, the whole Red Sea crossing and the discovery of the site at the base of the Saudi Arabian Mount Sinai. What did you make about all this?
Yeah, I mean, that was really interesting too. Basically where they were tracing the path of what the supposed trek was from Egypt to across, to the Red Sea to be able to cross it, where they weren't really finding too much in that aspect. But I think it was Ron Wyatt who actually found a passage through the mountains that could very well have been the path that they took to get to the Red Sea. That was really interesting. And then, he and his son also did dives in the Red Sea to see, what type of, what artifacts if any, they could find down at the bottom. And they found quite a bit of, things that seemed like they were from chariots and could possibly be chariots from Egypt. Like the wheels that they found, they had Egypt use a specific type of hubcap on the chariot wheels, and that was more rounded. And they were able to find wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea that, looked similar to what the Egyptians were using at the time, as well as, they found, I think, horse hooves, human bones. Of course, you're going to find that in any ocean, but just have it in that same spot is pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a wagon wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no argument about that. And then, yeah, just to kind of like visualize what you're saying, I had that map pulled up. But the traditional idea is that they cross somewhere here. And Ron Wyatt's idea is that they cross here. This is called the Sinai Peninsula. This is where people have traditionally said is Mount Sinai. But what Ron Wyatt thinks is this mountain called Jabal Makla or Jabal al-Lawaz. This is the actual site, and then we'll kind of get a little bit further into that. But yeah, this is interesting. And again, like, this is tangible shit. Like, if he was just saying these things and being like, oh, I found this geographical structure that looks like it could have helped, that'd be one thing. But the motherfucker finds fucking remnants of wagons. Like, this is, he finds like a thriving in the Red Sea. He finds this thriving coral environment, building structures that are just fucking mimicking wagon wheels,
where coral normally doesn't grow
because there's no organic material.
Exactly.
This is tangible stuff, but because of and again, rightfully so, any country that is bordering this or near this or claims this, just like Egypt with its ancient sites, says you do not disrupt the ecosystem, do not move, do not touch. Anything done here has to be approved by the government. But it's a shame because like that is some real stuff that could be investigated. That's tangible, more tangible data that, again, regardless of what his faith is or what your faith is, that's tangible information that is canonically accurate. It's close enough. It's close enough to be right where it's not that far from where
it's really not far-fetched.
It's supposedly where it supposedly happened. This isn't that far. Yeah, here's a horse's hoof. And then this is I'm trying to get this good visualization. It's right here, but this is the crossing of the Red Sea right here. And this will fucking load. But basically, like, there's this area of land in this exact spot on the Red Sea that theoretically could have at lower tide or some
where you could have just walked across.
You could have walked across it like water or ankle deep, which is what it says in the Bible. And by the time the Roman army comes there, the water rises again and just traps them all and kills them. I don't know why this isn't loading, and of course they found human remains. I wish I could show you this picture.
But not just on the Egyptian side, also on the Saudi Arabia side as well. Is they found a bunch of old artifacts out in that area too.
Well, that's, and actually, honestly, let's save this. This is where it will get interesting, because this is in my opinion, it's the craziest shit. It's like the biggest stacking of. You're like, what? All these things right here?
Yeah, everything's adding up.
If you want to know more about this or continue the conversation, the next portion of this, where we go a little deeper into Saudi Arabia, the real Mount Sinai, and the location of all of your favorite events from the early stories of the Bible. Join us on Patreon for extra legitimate business. This is going to wrap up the first hour of the free episode on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Paul, thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything you want to tell people who are interested in this?
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's basically just what we talked about. Don't take everything at face value. Everything that, we're taught from histories are all, like we said, just been passed down for centuries, millennia, to where it's all becoming just washed out. The facts aren't all there. Have an open mind about most things of our world, because it's most likely not exactly what everybody's telling us.
And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay if we don't have it right. It's okay if we just for fun think about what if on possibilities, especially where shit like this is concerned. No one knows enough to say that they're 100%. They know 100% factually.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's mostly theoretical. So
well, and science is a method, and it should be employed everywhere. Every time we find a new piece of information, we should look at it and be like, okay, let's do the test, and if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But if it does, then we reanalyze how we're thinking about things. I don't know. That to me is kind of supposed to be a no-brainer in science, but
you would think.
Yeah, anymore. I feel like the institution is always more important. But anyways, this has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. First hour is free on YouTube. Like, subscribe. Thank you, Paul Estrada. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.